I think we have to start at 7 p.m. exactly.
Okay. No, I see we have now a few participants, huh? So excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
good. They join us. What I was thinking, by the way, Brigitte, that we actually first met like 9 years ago. And it was in St. Petersburg when we were.
I was just gonna say that's where we first met. Absolutely, I so remember that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh
and
yes.
Occasionally, I'm again in St. Petersburg today, and we are meeting
Very
again.
appropriate. Very appropriate. I remember that St. Petersburg meeting. Actually, that was a fantastic meeting, and we went to the opera together. Remember, we went to see that ballet. Wow, that was quite memorable. Yeah, I totally remember that. Yeah, good. I'm glad you did too.
And it was already 9 years ago.
Can
you believe? Unbelievable.
Yes. Yeah. No, I can. And it was we had this big meeting, I remember, and honestly I'm not sure I remember all the details of the meeting, but I remember the visit of St. Petersburg and the evening at the MYSTIQUE. That was
it was great. And anyway, unfortunately not all of people who are now here were then in Mariinsky, and I will make just a very brief introduction. So we are really lucky today to have Brижитт Морел-Карен, who is a very famous person because she was supporting and she was making and changing lives of very many executives of Fortune 500 firms, of huge privately owned enterprise. Brigitte had a lot of clients in Russia who became different and who changed their careers and got some additional power. And the way how Brigitte made it, maybe she will share some of her hints and secrets today. And today actually is our second meeting when we are meeting international world best class coaches who are really changing lives and who are changing careers. Brigitte, my first question to you will be, and we are very much interested about personal stories. And could you please tell us your story? How have you become a coach, an executive coach?
You know, it's, gosh, I didn't get out of school thinking I'm going to be an executive coach. Even actually to this day, I don't necessarily think of myself as an executive coach. I think I rather think of coaching as one of the multiple toolkit and expertise and approaches I have in my area of choices to work with executives. And I think what really got me to spend more of my time in that role of working with very senior leaders in this supporting role has been for me to go through my own journey and my own work of purpose. And so it's a personal journey, and I will encourage anyone who is thinking of this profession to first go within and figure out what you're good at and what do you value and what impact you want to have. And I have this purpose, which is to ignite leadership that matters towards a more purposeful world. I actually believe that executives who have large scope, large scale, a lot of people reporting to them, influence and impact the world way beyond their own organizations, just by the way they lead, by how they show up, by who they are. And when we help one of these leaders to get further on their journey of being their best selves, I think we have a fantastic impact on the world. So that really is what drove me to spend more of my time in this work. And you know, coaching, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. I also do a lot of group coaching, team coaching, particularly working with senior teams. And that is even more powerful to impact an organization, is to have that senior team around the leaders. So yeah,
What
it's
is the
probably
difference between coaching individuals and coaching executive teams?
well, it's a coaching. I think coaching is a set of techniques and capabilities and approaches you use. And I will add that to discovery, exploration, advising, guiding. So there is more to the work I do with teams in particular than just the coaching. I also believe when you work with a team, you just don't coach individuals inside a team. You actually coach the team. It's a work of the team that define their impact, and it's how you work with that team as an entity that help them to reflect on themselves. You know, and I'm more of a mirror and trying to really help them understand how do they impact, how do they interact with each other, how do they go together towards a collective purpose. So that's what I do.
Very interesting. Brigitte, and what is your definition of executive coaching? How do you describe this?
How do I describe executive coaching? It's a, coaching is it's a relationship, and it's the work of coaching is to bring clarity, to help someone get more clarity through powerful conversations. And it is through these discussions and conversations that a coach engages with that someone is going to unfold their own reflection. And at the end of the day, I think of coaching as a deep exploration of who you are today, whether as a team or as a person, a profound reflection on who do you want to be, what's your purpose, what impact you want to have on the world, what leadership identity do you aspire to, and then in between those two things is an opportunity for profound transformation, for someone to be their best selves, or for a team to be its best self in the accomplishment of its purpose. So that's really how I describe the work I do. And again, it's that same journey, whether it's with a person or with a team. Yeah, clarity.
Brigitte, you mentioned that executive coaching is only one of the tools you have. What else do you have working with the executives and with the executive teams, and what are the most important?
Well, first of all, I think one of the, you don't declare yourself an executive coach. You start working with people, and then they call you back, they recommend you, and an executive coach is not someone that you Google on the internet in many ways. So it's very much a word of mouth, and it's the impact you have that's going to define that. And I think what I've discovered of my work with very senior leaders, and it's one of my practices, is I really work hard to try and understand where they are, their context, their challenges, their business. It's that understanding of what someone is dealing with day to day that's going to allow a powerful conversation. And so to do that, I studied management, finance, math, all sorts of things. And I apply that, right? I make it a point to be very updated and informed of what's going on in the world. I make it a point of always updating myself on that company before I talk to a CEO, because guess what? If his talk has had a big impact, if one of his big customers has had, a big blow up, COVID, obviously, it's getting myself into the context of that person. So one of the techniques I use is not only coaching, is business and business management and understanding where they are. I think the challenge as a coach that comes from the world of consulting, which is my case, is to really navigate the space of advising, coaching, discovering, and exploring. It's, you know, to me, those are different things. There is a piece of, another of my practice is that I am a curious person, so I need to understand. So when I start working with someone, I deepen in who is that person. I'm just a curiosity about exploring and uncovering who someone is. And that is not, I never pretend to know that person in ways they don't know themselves, but I think that curiosity will allow me to help the person be curious about himself or herself. And then there is actual coaching, mentoring topic, went through a conversation and questioning and reframing and bringing perspective. You can help someone make their own choices or consider different things. And then at times, particularly true with CEOs, honestly, they just want your opinion. They want your advice. You know, I'm dealing with this. I have these 2 people in my team. And then I am very explicit about, I don't think it's a coaching question here. I think you want my opinion. So let me give you my opinion and see whether that's helpful. But I think it's important to be very explicit between the role of consultant and the role of coach, because those are really kind of different angles of a relationship. Yeah, particularly when you come from that world. You're frozen. You have a very good look on the screen, Oksana, but I'm worried that either you or I are disconnected. So I hope this is live. I hope I don't see anything on the chat telling me you guys are not hearing me. So let me maybe continue on that question of this coaching versus consulting. I think you arrived to coaching via different routes. You might arrive to coaching being a psychoanalyst or from psychological studies. You may arrive there from being a consultant, which was my case. You may arrive there from being a business executive, a very successful people leader, and you think you can help others. Whatever your route, what I have found is to really consider that coaching in and of itself is a profession and is a skill. And it's something that you need to learn. You know, my own story, I was a decent consultant and I did a lot I had strong relationship and with clients, and my clients would come to me for mentoring, and I felt I was mentoring and coaching them until one of my colleagues challenged me and said, no, you're a consultant, you're not a coach. You need to learn what coaching is. And he was right. And I did go to a coaching course, which I took 2 years to complete. So a fairly robust and comprehensive way to think about coaching. And I really developed an understanding and an appreciation for the ways in which coaching is anchored into some principles, and it's anchored into some techniques and tools. And I am pretty rigorous about embedding those, using them, and being also intentional in the way I'm going to build a relationship of coaching in that way. So I believe that, yes, you need to, if you want to be a coach, you need to learn to be a coach. And I have asked that from people in my team in the past, said, you know, some great executive search people who have spent their life being really career mentors and counselors and consultants to the clients. And they are very savvy and very bright, and they have empathy, and they ask good questions, and they are good mentors. And I've told them, you know, go learn to be a coach. And all the colleagues that I've worked with who have done that, I've said, yeah, you're right. There was something there that I didn't know. So I think that's been probably the crux of that. And since Oksana sent me some preparation, let me check here. please can you send me or indicate on the chat if you don't hear me? Because I, for the moment, Oksana is gone. I hope everybody else is online and is, and we're still on track here. So if I don't see anything on the chat, I'm going to assume that we are working, and I might just continue with the notes that I had prepared. You know, another question that's very often asked, especially for people like me who came through to coaching via a route of, I was an entrepreneur, I run a business, I was myself a CEO, which is where I have that understanding and affinity for the role. And then I became a strategy consultant, and that's how I grew into becoming a coach. Many people go to coaching via psychoanalytics or psychiatry or psychology. And I'm often asked, do you need to be a psychoanalyst to be a good coach? And I do have a point of view about that also with my own story. I studied psychology, actually. It was one of the degrees I took. But when I started to be formally an executive coach about 15 years ago, when I got into the Korn Ferry practice, hang on, I see that a few of you have. Yeah, we do hear you. Okay, perfect. So I got into this situation once where I misread a participant. As simple as that. I had this impressive person coming in and really was saying the right things and was being pushed into coaching by his board. So there was a few things at stake for him. He was expected to shift his behavior. He was an external hire who culturally didn't fit with the organization as well as his board wanted to, and they wanted a coach. And I completely failed to see that was actually a narcissistic personality. I think I understood there was something about his childhood that had really blocked him, that there was this barrier in social interaction, that he had an enormous need for protecting his ego. But I just shouldn't have taken him as a coach. I should have referred him to psychoanalysis. So that was a great lesson for me. I think we made some progress with this person, but really not as much as I would have dreamed of, and as I have done with other, psychologically healthy people. So my sense is that as a coach, you don't necessarily need to be a psy. You need to do your homework to understand and recognize when there is a derailer, when something is going to get in the way of you being able to work healthily with this person. And I like to think that psychoanalysis or the work of psychiatry is often looking at someone's mental makeup and childhood history with a view of figuring out what went wrong and where is a trauma. Whereas I considered my work with executives from the assumption that these are brilliant, mentally healthy human beings who have been enormously successful in their careers and have gone to where they are because they have managed to navigate, in particular, relationships and the ability to interface with others and to be impactful. But it's always in the back of my mind that there are some psychological trauma that a coach is not equipped to deal with. And then it's about referring somebody to someone else. And it's also being articulate about who are you going to work with, being intentional about who you are going to work with. I think that's important. And it's important. And now, again, I've made many mistakes and I've learned from them. So what I've tried to do is now to make new mistakes, but not to repeat the old ones. And one of the practices that I have now is that before working with someone, especially when I am hired by a boss or by a board as opposed to by the person himself or herself. Before working with someone, I want to spend a one-on-one hour with that person, which is just about understanding what does that person want? Why are they getting involved in spending time with this relationship? What are they aspiring to? And I have now had a couple of situations where I said, I am not sure that this is the best way for you to spend your time right now, or maybe there are other options for you to go and develop. So to be really honest and courageous and independent. And that's the other thing that I learned early, and I learned in my coaching course, and I will just repeat it. You should always be independent of the financial or otherwise relationship decisions of getting into an engagement. You know, a chairman that you really have a great relationship with, and he really wants you to work with that person, and you want to protect your relationship with this great chairman. I have had to, again, go to that person and say, you know, I understand what you want to accomplish, but I am not sure this is what this person needs, or I don't think I'm the best person to work with her. So being, you know, stepping back and gaining a level of independence, that is really important. Let me, so Oksana's internet has crashed. And there is a question for me. Is it possible for a coach to reflect the work with a client? Yes, so I think that's what I was talking about. It's not only possible, it's advisable. You know, oh, hello, Oksana, welcome back. We are a couple of steps ahead.
I'm sorry, I got disconnected. Hope you enjoyed your time. Sorry, Brigitte.
I hope everybody else is enjoying it. You know, I'm here chatting alone, but I hope we're on a good track. So I think your guidelines that you sent me ahead of time were very useful. So I think we talked a little bit about how you become a coach and how you learn and how it's important to manage the coaching relationship. Hang on now, is it me? I think I lost you. No, I'm here. So, and how important it is to have an independent coaching relationship. And we talked about, you know, at times you just need to say no. You just need to have the independence and the courage to do what's right, because it is a relationship that needs to feel right. And so, yeah, that is. So that's where we are.
Coach needs curiosity, an executive coach needs to have a business background and needs to be independent.
You know, I wouldn't say, again, you know, as I was saying, business background, consulting, and psychiatry are very often the route to get there. I don't think you need one or the other. I think you need to be aware of what you miss. I think people who come with a background of psychiatry, of psychology, may need to spend a little bit more time on the business side of things to really understand what it is that the CEO they work with is dealing with. I think there is a level of empathy that's important. You know, I also believe that as a coach, we work with a whole person. And if you work with a whole person, you also work with their brain and their heart and their head and their spirituality and their physical conditions. And to work with a whole person, you also need to work with their business context and have some affinity for that. As I say, I don't understand the complexity you deal with, and I will never pretend that I could do your job. But have you thought about this, or different perspective, or different ways? So I think the business savvy is important to work, particularly with CEO, I would say. Maybe unique of that level.
Interesting. Yeah. By the way, Brigitte, one of my questions is, why do you think all these brilliant executives, CEOs in particular, because you are famous of working with the existing CEOs and future CEOs, why do they need coaches?
You know, I really think there are two big reasons. I think the first is that enterprise leadership, which is a juncture in a career where you are there at the top and you own the business and you're constantly faced with paradox. You have demands on your time that are multifold compared to, you know, what you did before. You have a tsunami of stakeholders who want your attention. I mean, the pressure is on. You are always on. You are all, whatever you do is visible. This is the moment where the difference in your impact will come from how do you show up. It's a being, it's how you are. And it's not what you do. What you do, you can read in a book, and it's how you do it. It's who you choose to engage and who you choose to ignore. It's how you choose to pay attention to certain issues and not some others. Where do you challenge and where do you let go? The conviction you developed for a big, bold move. And all of that is going to be about mindfulness. It's about that capacity to re-anchor yourself in a mindful, detached, grounded, purposeful manner to realize that these big decisions you make, there is an emotional component. Do I understand that? There is a stakeholder component. Do I understand that? There is a risk. So who am I? Am I a bisquick staker? In which case I need somebody who is not. Am I less bold than I should be? Then I need a big, bold person next to me. So it's that knowledge of yourself that's going to be allowing you to deploy yourself at your best. And that's exactly what coaching is about. Coaching is about elevating mindfulness. So that to me is need number one. Need number two is well known. It's pretty lonely up there. So many CEOs in particular, but C-levels in big companies, something. There are very few people who just have nothing at stake. I can challenge you. And especially when you have a level of independence where sometimes I approach a situation and I said, you know what, the worst that can happen is that he fires me and I can live with that. So I am going to just go there. I'm going to just challenge this or engage that. And yeah, CEOs need to have independent voices who understand what they are dealing with. So sometimes they have families and friends, but who don't always connect with their professional world. So they need someone who is independent, and we will challenge them and engage with them with an understanding of that context. So yeah. And in fact, I think there is a huge risk for any CEO who thinks he can do it alone. I think it's a risk.
What is the risk?
To just start to be so sheltered. Whether you like it or not, people are not telling you the entire truth. As much as you like to ask them the truth out there is filtered. It's filtered by the stakeholder lens. It's filtered because you have a lot of power. You have power over me. And therefore, I am going to navigate my relationship with you, keeping my own interest in mind. And I think what makes a good executive coach is that it is just not about me. Never. You know, as I said, I never get into a relationship where I think I might be fired. That's okay. I can live with that any day if I have helped that person be stronger, better. And guess what? I've never been fired. I've been fired once. We all get that. But,
Really?
you know, I've been fired once.
Wow.
I think that it, you know, there's sometimes relationships just don't go at the level of depth, or someone is not getting the value, and then you see it and you say, this is what you wanted, and everybody agrees that's not going so well, and we say goodbye. That's fine. That's okay.
What are the evidences? How do you read that the relations do not go to that level of depth?
Yeah, there is really something about I have a couple of practices that I'm pretty rigorous about. First of all, I take a lot of notes. So after every coaching conversation, I capture notes about what has been said. I always give practices and to-dos and, reflection questions. So the coaching is not just what happens in the session, it's what's happened in between as well. And then I reflect around how powerful was that conversation. And when you work with somebody for a year and you have 15 conversations, then some conversations are more powerful than others. That's okay. But if I go through 2 or 3 conversations and I feel that was not as powerful, then I'll bring it up. I said, hey, is this delivering the value you need? What are you getting from this conversation? How do we work differently together? What would you like me to do differently? And then, and then again, just dispassionately look at how do you deliver value? That's all that matters. Impact and value, that's what matters.
Interesting. Brigitte, and on average, how long are your relations with the client? How many sessions?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Sometimes I have to say I find it difficult to work with somebody for less than 6 months. Can you hear me? Oh no, maybe Oksana again has got this bad internet. It's a good question. So I find it difficult to get, you guys can hear me, right? Send me a chat if that is not the case. To me, 6 months is a minimum. Not, you could have 2 sessions with somebody and they have a fantastic awareness raising and they realize something they have never realized before and they decide they're going to do this or that. And there is a moment where it all disappears and it's like a souffle, something is just powerful for 1 hour and somebody makes this big connection and click in the head and something becomes clearer. But if you don't see that person a month later to check in around, what did you do about that insight? How has that translated into your behavior, the ways you show up? What are you doing differently as a result? And if you don't go back 6 months later and say, that was something that seemed to have really shifted for you 6 months ago, but now I'm just curious where you are with that practice. So change doesn't sustain personal transformation, which is a lot of what coaching aims to do. It's how to help someone transform towards their best selves. And that level of transformation doesn't sustain without someone who understands and who nudges and who deepens and who discusses how things are going. And to me, 6 months minimum. I think the maximum I've worked with anybody was 2 years. And that is, in my mind, a little bit too long. I like things to have closure. And I think a coaching relationship, or not the relationship, a coaching engagement is something that you need to bring closure to. And after a year, ideally, sometime after 18 months, but I try not to make that longer, I like to have a session which is all about passing on the accountability to that person. We've worked together for this 1 year or 18 months. Here are all the great things you've done. Here's what I'd like to celebrate about the person you are today and how different you are from the person you were 18 months ago. And by bringing that explicitly, you create a new baseline for this person to go through the next step of their journey. And you talk about that. What more or differently would you like to do? How would you like your growth journey to now evolve and shape up? And then I think as a coach, you need to get out to avoid dependencies. Again, that I have an ethical point of view about that. Too many coaches get into this wonderful, cozy relationship with a CEO in particular, and they are very confident, and these relationships go on and on and on and on for years. I have to believe there is a point where you have lost the value and impact you make. Oh, I think that's my case. So I like to close it. But interestingly, I have this one person I've worked with for, gosh, 8 years. And I am about to start my 4th engagement with this leader. I started to work with her. She was like, you know, an upper level manager. And now she's on the CEO track and we are going to work together again. But every time there's been a beginning, a closure, and a kind of pass on ownership and accountability, somebody needs to own, people need to own their own development. They shouldn't be dependent on a coach. And coach dependency, in my view, that means I haven't done my job well. I haven't built those muscles of mindfulness and reflection and awareness and choices that someone can do that without me every month challenging them. Yeah. So that's where I make a distinction between the engagement and the relationship. A relationship can be longer. How many coaches can I have at any given time? It really, I think it's everybody has their own answer. If I work with a team, then I tend to have a more limited bandwidth for other engagements because I find that really absorbs a lot of my attention and I need to understand all of the people in my team. Honestly, I find it difficult to have more than 15 or 20 people in my mind. I like maybe 10 to 12. I have another practice at least once a month. I try to just step back and think of all my coachees and, you know, did I read something that one of them might benefit from? Or should I maybe just send a quick SMS to someone and say, hey, how are you doing on this? So I reach out proactively to my coachees when I know they are dealing with something, like somebody at a big event. So the next day I'll put a little reminder in my calendar to ask them, how did it go? How did you show up? Do you want to have a quick debrief? I also like to have formal session, and I really don't want them more than 4 weeks apart. Ideally 3.5 weeks, you know, in between. I don't like, you know, longer you lose the, you know, the energy and the thread. And then I also make it a point that people can call me. And it often happens, somebody just sent an SMS, you know, Friday night, this has happened, you have 5 minutes to talk. And I think sometimes those are the best conversations when someone is dealing with something and it's, you know, it's in their mind, they're like obsessed by whatever happened. And when you can discuss that with somebody, that obsession shifts to a more controlled, rational thought that you can make choices about. And that's what coaching is about. Yeah. Then there is a question on client success. You know, what's my biggest client success? Well, there's probably the CEO Institute, which is the unit I was running at Korn Ferry. I think the biggest success has been to make that a really mainstream programs that has a whole reputation of its own. And as you know, I now see people's resumes say I graduated from the CEO Institute. So that probably has been my a way to think about success, because that means the impact as being repeatedly powerful, such that people talk to each other about the program and the personal transformation, the experience, and the impact leaders have had on their business has been substantial enough that in the long term, they note it and they remember it. So that to me is success. And yeah, I think, you know, but again, so today I had a great call. I was just catching up with, you know, a person that I really like. I coached him 2 or 3 years ago, and he has just been appointed number 2 of a very, very large business. So he's running a whole big chunk of the organization. And we were chatting, and he was saying, oh, I so valued our time together. Now I need you. I'd like to re-engage with you. And half of me says, oh, I'm so pleased. Particularly, I like this person. I think he's a great leader. And I like the fact, obviously, that he has valued the work we've done together. And I always have got this little, on the back of my mind, a little reminder that says, hey, it's not about you, it's about him. Can you help him? Let's restart with a relationship that is fresh for this role, for this situation, for what he's trying to accomplish. And let's make sure that I don't, it's my success is the impact I have on leaders, and in turn, the impact those leaders have on the world. That's the way I think about it. What makes the difference between a great executive coach and a good one? There is a left brain answer to that, is how many people call you, or how much people want to work further with you or call you back. I don't know that there is a good and bad coach. I think that, yes, there are people who, in my mind, are insufficiently qualified either to be executive coach. Particularly, a lot of people are life coaches. And there is a big distinction between being a life coach, being a great psychoanalyst, being a great consultant, and being an executive coach. So I think it's important to be aware of what the requirements are to have the privilege of working with these extraordinary leaders. But on top of that, I think that the difference between good to great has a lot to do with the quality of the relationship. And being aware and intentional in that relationship, understanding how do people impact you and how do you impact them. Another story that I'd like to share, again, one of my earlier examples, and I was not particularly happy with that engagement, but I worked with someone, again, someone recommended by his business, and I knew the CEO who wanted me to work with this BU leader. And after a while, I decoded afterwards that I just didn't look forward to these conversations. Whenever I saw his name on the calendar, there was something happening to me in my heart that I had not really paid attention to. And I just didn't feel it was great. And I had to just step back and think what it is that is not working in this relationship. And it was really a question of values. And so another thing that I've always tried to do is to have colleagues that I can speak with. When something like that happens, is have someone you trust, a fellow coach, a colleague, someone who understands what you do. And I have had several fantastic coach colleagues at Korn Ferry, and I called one of them and said, something is going on with this person, help me unpack that. And that was a good coaching for me to point the finger on the fact that there was a huge value disconnect between one of my core values and one of the core values of this person. Just borderline an ethical gap between who he was and what I stand for. And once I put my fingers on this, I just was able to better self-manage, to really put that aside. You know what? I respect his value set. I have to make a distinction. It's not about me. It's what the psych called, the counter-transference issue, and the fact that, people impact you, and the alignment of values matters between you and your coachee, like it matters to build any kind of trusting relationship. The difference is that it is a professional relationship, and in order for you to create a really trusting, powerful alliance with this person, which is the baseline for good coaching, sometimes you need to work on yourself. So that would be one of my to-dos and points of attention always. And then coaching male and females, absolutely different. And I have the privilege of having done a lot of both. Different, but again, beware of stereotypes and beware of assumptions. I have had several wonderful coaching relationships with senior female executives, because at times maybe they feel there is more affinity because I kind of understand in some ways what they are going through. I also have my little checklist around what I have hypotheses, and I'm careful about hypotheses and assumptions. So I have this hypothesis that perhaps a female executive may be less self-confident, less sure of herself, less assertive than a male executive. Well, it's an hypothesis, but I'm going to test it very deliberately at the outset of a relationship. And I also may have this assumption that this person may be misread by her male colleagues, which is so often what happens. And again, in my surveys and interviews, I always do stakeholder interviews at the beginning of an engagement. I always do. I like to understand the context and the dynamics that someone deals with. And I try in those stakeholder interviews to wrap my head around how much the impact that this woman has on her colleagues has got to do with their own bias and towards a gender difference. So I try to unpack all of that and understand it, but it's never more than an hypothesis, and then I'll explore it. What do you think? Is that true? What's true about you? Might that be an issue? What are we thinking here? What is this relationship with your boss? You know, why is that? Yeah, so it's always about exploring. Professional, do not feel sympathy towards a client. Yeah, so let me answer the second half of that question. The question is, what if you do not feel sympathy towards a client? Should you always feel sympathy for a person you're working with? I think yes, and I would take it to the next level. There are clearly people that you like. I mean, I have a couple of leaders I work with. I love those guys. I think that, I enjoy it. I look forward to my conversations with them. So it's true. Your heart is your heart. Your feelings are your feelings. Just make sure you understand it. What I really try to be intentional about is to decode my own feelings for some people. And I know there are some people that I really, really like, and then I need to self-manage because I still want to challenge them, think differently, bring them perspective, take that part of the relationship out, maybe to make sure that I allow a level of discomfort between us, that from where maybe something will stem. So I need to be attentive to that. And in the same fashion, I have worked with people, well, that example I gave early on, where I knew I quote unquote did not really like this person. And I have the choice. I quit or I self-manage. And I made the point of self-managing. And I think our coaching relationship completely shifted from that point on. And I actually talked to him a year ago, 18 months ago. He changed job. He became the CEO. He actually got his dream job. And I saw that on LinkedIn. So I sent him a note and, and we had a wonderful conversation. So it's not about liking, but it's very much about your own self-awareness of the nature of that relationship and the nature of the feelings you have for that person. So professional taboos. Yeah, there are some. Again, I think that independence is really key. Really something that I always manage. In fact, what did I say? I think I talked about that, but really being courageous to evaluate if there is a psychological issue and to put it on the table and potentially to bring the relationship to an end. I think there is something about just being honest and courageous, honest, take perspective, really think about, are you going to add value to this company by helping this person transform towards their best self? And if you have a doubt on your ability to answer the question, then you need to question whether you should work with this person, whatever the reason is. So yes, to me, if you don't make an impact and if you don't help someone transform in some ways, you shouldn't do this. So yeah, that's probably my big taboo there. Is there any set of minimum education? Yeah, so it's a little bit of what I covered or what I suggested before. There is really a question on where do you come from and how much are you going to give yourself all the skills and techniques to be at that baseline. And again, you might want to be a life coach, which is somebody who works with somebody's emotions and personal life choices, and which is, there's a whole world of coaching around that. You might want to be a business coach where you work with more managerial levels, and then it's an understanding of what challenges managers work with. If you aspire to be an executive coach, which means you work at that top hierarchical level in big organizations, I think it is about combining and learning what you haven't studied or practiced before. So if you're not upside, get your studies going, get the right books, study, get into a course to upgrade yourself at a minimum on, trauma. If you are not from business, do your homework on business, and you absolutely should have a certification. And yes, the price of admission is quite low. It was, it's been the case in many countries. I don't think Russia is necessarily unique. As a matter of fact, I find that my experience with Russian executives is that many of them are quite thoughtful and quite, quite attentive to impact. So you may get in your first engagement, but you don't get much further if you don't make an impact. So that, I think, takes care of elevating the bench. But there is huge value in coaching. I mean, there is a good reason why this profession is growing exponentially. It's because I think the proof is there that it can make a big difference, a real big difference. And I think that's what matters.
So Russia
Russia is
not sorry. So, this is a digital world. I was checking the internet connection the whole day and evening of yesterday, but you are never prepared of what happens next. So
and
Russia,
you need to dance. You need to dance with whatever happens.
Dance in the moment. Right. Yes, dance in the moment. True, Brigitte. So Russia is not unique in that respect. You mean that other more developed economies are living the same processes now?
Yeah. I think so. I think it's a young profession. So like any young profession, there is a core group that is starting to elevate the profession and to make it strong. And then there is, all sorts of ancillary players that sometimes impact the profession negatively because they don't bring the seriousness and the quality and the excellence of the core group. But that's a matter of time, and then excellence will prevail and will be recognized. So yes, I would offer this is probably the best way to think about it. It's a matter of time. And even there is a big reason why so many big corporations now have shifted a lot of their budget away from collective work to the individual work of coaching. It's just because it makes, there is more return for the dollar spent. It's just you know, and that at the end of the day drives business decisions. So I think that would
quality business decisions. Brigitte, I know that you were already talking about education of the coaches, but what do you think about certification? Is it obligatory or is it not obligatory?
So to me, there is something about going through certification that I think is a good way to at least establish that someone has done the appropriate studying, someone has gone through the appropriate exams, and there is a minimum level. And then most people are part of the ICF. There's a couple of other associations, but there's 2 or 3. But what these organizations do is that they do have ethical principles and ways to really give robustness to the profession. So yes, I think going through certification is important. And in fact, a lot of corporate clients require now that you be ICF certified. So that's just become a way in which clients protect themselves to have a minimum threshold of professionalism. I personally, so there are 3 or 4. You were asking me about books and schools of you know, there are many ways to be certified. I think the choice of where you are certified should come from where you come from. If you come from a business or consulting background, which was my case, go to one of the more out there life coaching kinds of certifications. So I took CTI, which is not really a business at all, not a business coaching class, but it's very powerful in personal and emotional terms. And that's what I needed. I have had colleagues.
Advice, and I'm now doing the fulfillment.
Oh, perfect. And it's a really wonderful personal experience as well. If you are a PSI, I would recommend you do an Ashridge or you do one of the business schools, because they approach coaching with much more of a business mindset. So use your certification not to go in your comfort zone, but to go the other end, you know, and to complement where you came from. That would be a recommendation. You know, the coach fit in my mind has got a couple of things. One is, have the conversation with several coaches and see what your heart tells you, and where do you feel that person is going to provide the right balance of supporting you, challenging you, adjusting to you, helping you grow, and giving you ownership, right? So those would be the key things to look for. But sometimes recommendation is good as well. That's how coaches tend to grow their practice. They get recommended. And so I would say those two ways, which is where it takes.
Brigitte, we have a question from Sergei Raskazov. What would be the best way to identify and hire a coach that will be a good fit for you?
Yes, so I would say there are a few criteria that I would list. And first of all, you need to get your short list. And to get the short list, it's a good idea to get some recommendations, people that are recommended to you. And then once you have the short list, speak to a couple of people. There's no need for you to interview 5 coaches. Speak to a couple. If really none of those speaks to your heart, maybe a third one. And I think it's about, does that person give you the sense that you will trust them, they will trust you, they will challenge you, they will allow you to own your own journey, they will have empathy and support you, and they will push you to be your best self. That's, to me, you know, that's the questions to ask. And there are a couple of authors. You said, you know, who are the authors? There are the books, but it's beyond the books, it's more of the authors. There are a few authors that I think are really helpful to understand the work of the coach. But I have more than 3. but there's all of the developmental psychology, school of psychology is useful. So Keegan and Erickson in particular, I would say, are two thinkers of the world of psychology that are really helpful to understand. Obviously, my own mentor, Kevin Cashman, who has put on the map the concept of leadership from the inside out. So is leadership from the place of who you are and what your purpose is. That tells me it's 7 o'clock, by the way. So I know we need to probably wrap up this conversation. I like Douglas Silsbee, Silsbee. I think he's the author of The Mindful Coach, and he has written a couple of what I thought were good books on coaching. I like Judith Glaser, Conversational Intelligence. That's a really, it talks a lot about how your brain impacts how you interact. And that's something that as a coach, we need to stay updated with brain research. It changes the way we understand the mind and mindfulness all the time. So that's one. And then I like Brené Brown. And Brené Brown is a bit of a different thinker, but she really brings something important to think about: being yourself, sense of belonging. She wrote this wonderful book called Braving the Wilderness, which is being both grounded in who you are and open to the broad stakeholder groups that challenge you out there. So to me, those are some of my, they are my own little gurus that I refer to all the time.
Thank you, Brigitte. And this is a perfect closing of our session today. And we have a lot of things to happen between the session. So I hope we meet again soon.
Likewise.
Thank you very much for our conversation today. It was great, although I missed most of it. But anyway, I will have a chance to view them on the Facebook.
Thank you for having me, and call anytime. I really think it's invaluable to have this network, and that, by the way, gives you one of the opportunities that is so important in a space like Russia, which is to connect as a community. I have always thought that other coaches are my community, and we learn from each other, and we help each other, and we can advise each other, and that's how we all become better and stronger for this community. So I would encourage you to do that.
Brigitte, thank you. And hope as soon as we can fly again, you come to Russia, and we'll help us building the community as well. Thank you, Brigitte. Have a great time. Bye,
everybody. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.